This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Bess Lomax Hawes was an American folk musician, singer, and teacher who died in November at the age of 88. She came from a family of music historians. She helped her father and brother, John and Alan Lomax, collect folk music. John Lomax developed an archive of American folk song at the Library of Congress. In the 1940s, after college, Bess Lomax joined the Almanac Singers, a group that sang social protest songs. Other members included Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, and Butch Hawes, who became her husband. The family later moved to California, where Bess taught music, including guitar and banjo. She also became an anthropology professor at what is now California State University, Northridge. In the 1970s, she worked at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. Later, she directed the Folk Arts program at the National Endowment for the Arts. She received the National Medal of Arts from President Bill Clinton in 1993. Daniel Sheehy is acting head of the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage at the Smithsonian. He worked with Bess Lomax Hawes and remembers how she worked to keep folk traditions from being lost. He said she found ways to help those voices, songs, stories, and craft traditions make it into the lives of a much broader public. Bess Lomax Hawes may be best remembered for a song from 1949. She and Jacqueline Steiner took old music and wrote new words for a campaign song. The song was to support Walter O'Brien, a Progressive Party candidate for mayor of Boston, Massachusetts. One of Mr. O'Brien's promises was to fight a fare increase on the transit system then known as the MTA. The song is about Charlie, a man who does not have enough money to leave the train, so he has to ride forever. Here is part of this funny song. Did he ever return? No, he never returned, and his fate is still unlearned. He may ride forever 'neath the streets of Boston. He's the man who never returned. The candidate lost, but the MTA song later became a huge hit with a version by the Kingston Trio. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. You can find transcripts, podcasts, and archives of our programs and links to our social media at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. An American nonprofit organization helps young people around the world to understand important issues and each other. The Global Nomads Group organizes educational video conferences. Students and speakers discuss subjects like AIDS, world religions, nuclear weapons, immigration, climate change, and politics. For example, students from at least 8 schools in Ghana talked with American students about the election and inauguration of President Obama. The Ghanaians took part from a distance learning center in Accra. Live coverage from Washington brought the energy from the streets to the classrooms, said a story in Modern Ghana News. The Global Nomads Group, or GNG, was started in 1998 by 4 university students. They wanted other young people to become more informed about the world. Programs have been held in more than 40 countries. The group says at least 10,000 students take part each year. Shirley Heron teaches high school in Magnolia, Texas. She says her school is not using the programs this year because of budget cuts. But she tells us in an email, a live conference feed was 100% better than a textbook. Magnolia is a small town, and for many of my students, this was an opportunity to travel around the world. One thing her students discovered is that they liked the same music and activities as many other young people around the world. The Global Nomads Group charges for programs, but says it tries to help schools with limited resources. In one program, students in Rwanda and at several American high schools asked each other questions. These included questions from Rwandan students about subjects like drug use, HIV/AIDS, and girls in school who get pregnant. An American boy asked about ethnic groups in Rwanda. He asked about the differences between the Tutsi and the Hutu. A girl in Rwanda answered, "There is no difference between the Hutus and the Tutsis. First of all, they are not 2 different tribes. We are one people. They are just ethnicities." At the end of the video conference, the Rwandan teacher made an announcement. She said, "In our culture, we never say goodbye, and we are going to entertain you. Thank you." And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Last week's report on bullying brought so many comments online, we are going to take this time to share some. One person who gave no name or country described an experience with a parent-teacher association. "I have been a victim of bullying in a PTA group. It is not just a problem for teenagers. Adults also engage in bullying activities, but it is usually verbal abuse by spreading lies to ruin your reputation or isolate the victim from the rest of the group. Since we are the role model of the next generation, our behavior will shape the future society." Vicky in Taiwan still remembers being scared by bullies in junior high school. And Jung Kim wrote, "Even we Koreans are made fun of by our own. If you're not cool with the popular people, you will be laughed at." Jeannie from Brazil says children should be taught to respect differences. And Kelly in the United States suggested that parents should spend more time with their children. If they are taught to be considerate when they are very young, they will not treat other people in a mean way. Joruji in Japan called for improving communication among students, parents, and teachers. Farshad, an Iranian in the United States, and Salim from France both suggested using psychologists in school to help control the problem. Some people complain that bullying is not always taken seriously. A commenter in Vietnam wrote, "We as parents and teachers should let children understand that they will be punished if they do wrong, and the punishments won't be only reminders or warnings." But not everyone agreed. Denisenko in Ukraine says what we call bullying is part of the socialization process. Children need to know how to defend oneself, how to establish relationships in a group. If laws or teachers or police will protect a child against bullying, he or she will never become an independent person. And several of you expressed sadness at the case of 15-year-old Phoebe Prince. Bullying may have led to her suicide. Monim Al-Hassi from Libya wrote, "I'm really astonished how such a beautiful, nice girl can do such a thing. She made a mistake when she listened to those who criticized her. They were jealous of her. God bless you, Phoebe Prince." You can find last week's report at voaspecialenglish.com. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Halt International Business School has campuses in Boston, San Francisco, London, Dubai, and Shanghai. The HALT Global Case Challenge is a competition based on the idea that solving world problems requires a good business plan. Teams compete for prizes of $1 million to help an organization with efforts to solve problems like hunger, poverty, and disease. A HALT student, Ahmad Ashkar, created the challenge for teams from business schools around the world. This year's challenge deals with poverty. Teams will compete to develop business plans for 3 non-governmental organizations. Solar Aid works on energy projects in East and Southern Africa. Habitat for Humanity builds low-cost housing. And 1 laptop per child builds computers for governments in developing countries to supply to poor communities. That group is taking part in the competition for the 2nd time. David Batley from Solar Aid says his group works with local entrepreneurs to bring power from the sun to rural communities. I think the winning team will be one that uses a combination of really innovative thinking and taking account of the practicalities of operating in Africa and the challenges that represents. Sandy Parakilas took part in the first competition in 2009. The challenge that year was to help an organization reach 100 million people in 5 years. One of the 3 top prizes went to his team from Carnegie Mellon University for their business plan for 1 laptop per child. They were struggling with competition from Microsoft and Intel, and they were having trouble basically making money. So it was a great opportunity for some business students to come in and create some ideas for a not-for-profit to be more profitable, essentially. Howard McNally is Chief Executive Officer of the HALT Global Challenge. He says it's the equivalent of about 20,000 hours of consulting advice from the world's smartest, youngest people. Mr. McNally says the students learn about world problems and the opportunities that might be available for them in the market. And it's also a tremendous opportunity for the NGOs that we're working with to get the kind of advice that they're going to get about their vision and their goals. The 5 HALT campuses will hold regional competitions in February. Finalists will be chosen in New York in April. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. President Obama talked a lot about education in his State of the Union speech in January. He said, "We need to out-innovate, out-educate, and outbuild the rest of the world. If Americans want to win the future," he said, "then they also have to win the race to educate their children." The president said, over the next 10 years, nearly half of all new jobs will require education that goes beyond a high school education. And yet, as many as a quarter of our students aren't even finishing high school. The quality of our math and science education lags behind many other nations. America has fallen to 9th in the proportion of young people with a college degree. 2 years ago, Mr. Obama set a goal to regain the world's highest rate of college graduates by 2020. He says the responsibility to give every child a chance to succeed begins not in classrooms, but in homes and communities. He said, "Only parents can make sure the TV is turned off and homework gets done. We need to teach our kids that it's not just the winner of the Super Bowl who deserves to be celebrated, but the winner of the science fair." President Obama talked about his Race to the Top competition. It offered states money to develop plans to improve teacher quality and student performance. Also, he called for preparing 100,000 new teachers in science, technology, engineering, and math over the next 10 years. Mr. Obama offered to begin debate with Congress on immigration reform, and he linked that issue to education. He said, "Today, there are hundreds of thousands of students excelling in our schools who are not American citizens. Some are the children of undocumented workers. They grew up as Americans and pledge allegiance to our flag, and yet they live every day with the threat of deportation. Others come here from abroad to study in our colleges and universities. But as soon as they obtain advanced degrees, we send them back home to compete against us." The speech came the same day the Education Department released the latest results on student progress in science. The goal is for all students to perform at the proficient or advanced level. But only about 1/3 of students in grades 4 and 8 and 1/5 of 12th graders did that in 2009. Just 1 to 2% of students performed at the advanced level. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Dyslexia is a problem that interferes with the ability to recognize words and connect sounds with letters when people read. People with this learning disorder may also have problems when they write. Dyslexia is not related to eyesight or intelligence. The problem involves areas of the brain that process language. Brain scientists are studying whether they can predict which young children may struggle with reading in order to provide early help. John Gabrielli at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is leading a study of 5-year-olds in about 20 schools in the Boston area. He says, "We partner with schools that have kindergartens, and in this study, what we do is, for all the children whose parents permit them to participate, we give them a brief set of paper and pencil tests to look at which children appear to be at some risk for struggling to read." So far, 50 of the kindergartners have been examined in a machine that shows brain activity. The goal is to study 500 children using fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging. The scanner uses a high-energy magnetic field and radio waves to look inside the body. Written tests are not always able to identify dyslexia or other problems. Professor Gabrielli says children can differ a lot in their abilities from day to day. He says brain scans may offer a more scientific way to identify problems. And with reading problems, he says, early identification is important. All the literature is that for intervention, behavioral programs, educational programs that help children overcome reading difficulties, the younger the child, the more effective they are. Reading problems are not usually identified until a child is in the 3rd or 4th grade. The longer the wait before children are recognized as poor readers, he says, the less these interventions can help. And, as Professor Gabrielli points out, poor reading can make education a struggle. Reading is everything. Even math and science have textbooks. During the brain imaging, the children are given tasks related to reading. They work with letters and sounds of language. The brain scans measure the extent to which certain parts of the brain become active while the children do the work. The neuroscientists say they are pleased with the early results, but still have a lot more work to do on the study. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. For more education news, plus activities for learning English, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Millions of high school students have read To Kill a Mockingbird. The novel by Harper Lee offers moral lessons about racial justice and respect. It tells the story of a young girl named Scout and her father, Atticus Finch, a lawyer. He defends a black man wrongfully accused of raping a white woman. In the end, an all-white jury sentences Tom Robinson to death. The book is set in the American South in the 1930s, but it was published 50 years ago on July 11th, 1960. It came out as the civil rights movement in the United States was gaining strength. Laws and customs in the South, however, still kept blacks and whites mostly separated. A mockingbird is a kind of gray songbird. The book gets its title from something Atticus Finch was told in his childhood when his father gave him a gun. Atticus Finch says his father told him it was a sin to kill a mockingbird because they don't hurt anyone, they just make music. Melinda Bird Murphy is head of the Alabama Center for Literary Arts. She says the moral of the story is be kind to one another, show human empathy and sympathy. Ms. Bird Murphy has read the book 4 times. She is a native of Harper Lee's hometown of Monroeville, Alabama. The author, who published only the 1 novel, is still alive, but rarely speaks publicly. Some people say To Kill a Mockingbird treats racism in a way that is simplistic, even offensive to blacks, and out of date in today's America. Still, it has been translated into more than 40 languages and has sold over 40 million copies. It won a Pulitzer Prize and is often required reading in high school. Gregory Peck won an Academy Award for playing Atticus Finch in the 1962 film version. The story takes place in a town that Harper Lee called Macomb, but she based the characters on real people she knew growing up. Since then, Monroeville has changed a lot. A number of African Americans serve in the local government. The courthouse, made famous by the book, is now a museum. A small shop and a fast food restaurant called Mel's Dairy Dream have replaced Harper Lee's childhood home. In Monroeville and around the country, fans of To Kill a Mockingbird are celebrating its 50th anniversary. Events include readings, discussions, and movie showings. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Cranes are large birds with long legs and necks. In Japan and other East Asian cultures, they represent luck and long life. Japanese tradition says a person who folds 1,000 paper cranes gets the right to make a wish. Some school children in the United States have been folding cranes. They want to show they care about the victims of the March 11th earthquake and tsunami in Japan. Almost 40 Japanese American students attend Somerville Elementary School in Ridgewood, New Jersey. But all 525 students at the school have heard about the disasters. So they have decorated their school with paper origami cranes. Their wish is for a speedy recovery for the Japanese people. Art teacher Samantha Stankiewicz says the activity gave students a way to express empathy for victims. She says, for children, the folding of the cranes has been a really positive way for them to feel like they're actively engaged. One boy said, "The crane is a symbol of hope, so we try to have a lot of hope for those people in Japan." And a girl at the school said, "It makes me feel really happy that everyone's caring for another country." And that care was not just in the form of paper cranes. The school principal, Lorna Oates Santos, says children at Somerville Elementary raised about $2,000 for disaster relief agencies. The two agencies they chose were the American Red Cross and Save the Children. The school also has a television club that produces weekly programs on different subjects. Fourth grade teacher Gabrielle King is the director of the club and says the students were involved in the school's efforts. When the earthquake happened, she says, the children wanted to know what they could do to inform other students and raise awareness for the people in Japan. So they decided to do a show on the earthquake and to also make the origami cranes. Some American children have shown their feelings for the victims in Japan in other ways. Yasuhisa Kawamura is Japan's Deputy Consul General in New York. He says one young girl brought a painting she had made to the consulate. The painting showed the two countries, Japan and the United States, shaking hands over the ocean and saying, "We are with you." Mr. Kawamura said consulate staff members were very moved and touched by this young girl's expression. The East Asia program at Cornell University in the United States has a lesson plan and directions for folding origami cranes. You can find a link at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. In November, the Institute of International Education in New York published its yearly report on international students in the United States. The report says more than 690,000 attended American colleges and universities during the last academic year. That number was a record high. It was an increase of 3% from the year before, but it was mainly the result of heavy growth from one country, China. China passed India as the top country sending students to the United States. The president of the institute, Alan Goodman, says the economic crisis could have limited growth from other countries. The Institute of International Education publishes its report called Open Doors with support from the State Department. The latest report is for the academic year that ended this past June. It says China sent more than 127,000 students. That was an increase of 30% over the previous year. India was the top sending country for 8 years, but last year it was in second place, followed by South Korea. Among the top sending countries, Japan showed the greatest decrease, a drop of 15%. For a 9th year, the University of Southern California in Los Angeles reported the largest number of foreign students, nearly 8,000. The most popular field of study for international students in the United States is business and management, followed by engineering. But the report noted a 9% decrease for intensive English language programs. Alan Goodman says the reason may have been the recession. He says English language training is often the most costly part for students beginning their studies. But Mr. Goodman pointed to an increase in another area: the number of foreign students at the undergraduate level. He says traditionally, study in America has been overwhelmingly at the graduate level. He says that has changed in the past several years. There has been almost an equal interest by families in sending students here for undergraduate education. He believes that is going to continue. There are 4,000 accredited colleges and universities. International students make up only about 3% of the total enrollment. What that means, he says, is that there is a lot of room for growth. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Graduate schools in the United States are reporting a 9% increase in applications from international students this year. The increase is the same as 2 years ago. Last year's gain was 11%. China, Mexico, and Brazil showed the biggest increases in applications to enter master's and doctoral programs this fall. Engineering is the top area of study for international students and had the biggest increase in applications. Gains in business and physical and earth sciences were close behind. Life sciences showed no growth in the latest survey by the Council of Graduate Schools. The survey includes the top 5 countries that send graduate students to the United States, plus Mexico and Brazil. The top 5 are China, India, South Korea, Taiwan, and Canada. Applications from China climbed 18% this year. That was down from last year. India's number increased just 2%. Applications from South Korea and Taiwan decreased by 1 to 2%. Applications from Africa were down 5%, while the Middle East and Europe showed growth. Council President Deborah Stewart says final results will not be available until the summer. She pointed out that applications do not necessarily convert to enrollment. About 47% of all international applications to U.S. graduate schools come from students from China. But the share of the applicant pool that actually ends up enrolling in U.S. graduate programs is lower. Ms. Stewart says last fall, for example, 29% of all international graduate students were from China. This year is the 7th year of big increases in applications from China, where Ms. Stewart points out that more and more students are finishing college. There is tremendous growth in the undergraduate population in China. But she also notes that more people apply to graduate school during difficult economic times. So it certainly is possible, she says, that these very exceptionally strong numbers could be a reflection of recession experiences in China as well. George Ofosu from Ghana is working toward a doctorate in political science at the University of California, Los Angeles. He says he was attracted to UCLA's coursework, libraries, and other resources, including financial aid he would not have had at home. He says it was an ideal opportunity for him to, 1, get training, and 2, get some funding to pursue his studies. He calls his experience really phenomenal. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For more stories about studying in the United States, go to voaspecialenglish.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, find our podcasts on iTunes, and watch our captioned videos at the VOA Learning English channel on YouTube. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. A new college guide in the United States compares educational requirements in 7 subjects. These include math, science, writing, and United States history or government. The other subjects are economics, foreign language, and literature. The free online guide is from the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. The Council is a nonprofit group that supports liberal arts education. Its president, Ann Neal, says these areas of knowledge are needed to succeed in a 21st century society and an increasingly connected world. Yet she told VOA's Faiza El-Masri it was surprising how many students can graduate with, in her words, a thin education. 42 of the 100 colleges and universities surveyed received the lowest marks. This meant they required 2 or fewer of the 7 subjects. 5 schools received a top grade for requiring 6 subjects. These were Brooklyn College in New York City, Texas A&M, the University of Texas Austin, West Point, and the University of Arkansas. Robert Costrell is Professor of Education Reform and Economics at the University of Arkansas. He says many, if not all, of the top American colleges once had a core curriculum, a set of courses required for all students. But over the years, many have dropped these requirements, or they have watered them down, Professor Costrell says, into what became known as distribution requirements. This system lets a student choose from a number of different courses to satisfy a requirement. Professor Costrell says schools should not only re-examine what they teach, they should also measure what students have learned. For example, through some form of examinations or papers. A report in October from the College Board showed that college prices continue to rise. But Ann Neal from the American Council of Trustees and Alumni says higher prices do not guarantee a better general education. In fact, the group found that the higher the tuition, the more likely that students have to develop their own general education. The college guide is on the web at whatwilltheylearn.com. Ann Neal says her group is surveying more colleges. The hope, she says, is to discover what college graduates have really learned and how ready they are to compete in the global marketplace. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Imagine that you have lost your job. You could start a sewing business at home if you had a better sewing machine and a little money to advertise, but you cannot get a loan from a bank. In recent times, many people in similar situations have received loans from student microfinance groups. Such groups make small loans for business or personal use. 12 of the organizations are part of a national network called the Campus Microfinance Alliance. The Alliance provides financial aid, technical advice, and training programs for its member groups. Each group has between 10 and 70 volunteers. many of them college students. They have enabled hundreds of people across the United States to launch small businesses. Vanessa Carter is director of the Alliance. She says bad economic times have sped the growth of the college microfinance movement. This really got started because students were walking off campus. It was the height of the economic recession, and they were seeing boarded up businesses and the effects of high unemployment firsthand. In Iowa, a student microfinance group at Grinnell College helps people both locally and internationally. The group started in 2007. At that time, Grinnell student Jeff Raderstrong and some friends raised more than $600 from other students. The Saturday night Grinnell tradition of missing a meal to help others enabled the group to make loans through the international microfinance organization Kiva.org. The Social Entrepreneurs of Grinnell, SEG, was launched. Later, SEG moved toward making loans directly to international partners. But as time passed, the group started helping people in Iowa. Jeff Raderstrong remembers how that developed. It sort of really quickly became clear that there was a lot that we could do in the community, in the Grinnell community. Because, you know, the town itself, there is some wealth, but there is a lot of poverty, and it is a lot of rural poverty. Mark Root Riley was another early member of SEG. He says the group recognized that small targeted loans at 0% or low interest could help local residents. SEG money has helped people make car payments so they can get to their jobs. It also helped patients in need of temporary housing near the medical center where they receive treatment. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. Get more news and learn English at voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. Not everyone who teaches in a college or university is a professor. Many are instructors or lecturers. In fact, not even all professors are full professors. Many of them are assistant or associate professors or adjunct professors. So what do all of these different academic titles mean at American colleges and universities? Get ready for a short lecture, especially if you are thinking of a career in higher education. Professors usually need a doctoral degree, but sometimes a school will offer positions to people who have not yet received their doctorate. This person would be called an instructor until the degree has been completed. After that, the instructor could become an assistant professor. Assistant professors do not have tenure. Tenure means a permanent appointment. This goal of greater job security is harder to reach these days. Fewer teaching positions offer the chance for tenure. Teachers and researchers who are hired into positions that do offer it are said to be on the tenure track. Assistant professor is the first job on this path. Assistant professors generally have 5 to 7 years to gain tenure. During this time, other faculty members study the person's work. If tenure is denied, then the assistant professor usually has a year to find another job. Candidates for tenure may feel great pressure to get research published. Publish or perish is the traditional saying. An assistant professor who receives tenure becomes an associate professor. An associate professor may later be appointed a full professor. Assistant, associate, and full professors perform many duties. They teach classes. They advise students. And they carry out research. They also serve on committees and take part in other activities. Other faculty members are not expected to do all these jobs. They are not on a tenure track. Instead, they might be in adjunct or visiting positions. A visiting professor has a job at one school but works at another for a period of time. An adjunct professor is also a limited or part-time position to do research or teach classes. Adjunct professors have a doctorate degree. Another position is that of lecturer. Lecturers teach classes, but they may or may not have a doctorate. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can read and listen to our reports at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Not everyone who teaches in a college or university is a professor. Many are instructors or lecturers. In fact, not even all professors are full professors. Many of them are assistant or associate professors or adjunct professors. So what do all of these different academic titles mean at American colleges and universities? Get ready for a short lecture, especially if you are thinking of a career in higher education. Professors usually need a doctoral degree, but sometimes a school will offer positions to people who have not yet received their doctorate. This person would be called an instructor until the degree has been completed. After that, the instructor could become an assistant professor. Assistant professors do not have tenure. Tenure means a permanent appointment. This goal of greater job security is harder to reach these days. Fewer teaching positions offer the chance for tenure. Teachers and researchers who are hired into positions that do offer it are said to be on the tenure track. Assistant professor is the first job on this path. Assistant professors generally have 5 to 7 years to gain tenure. During this time, other faculty members study the person's work. If tenure is denied, then the assistant professor usually has a year to find another job. Candidates for tenure may feel great pressure to get research published. Publish or perish is the traditional saying. An assistant professor who receives tenure becomes an associate professor. An associate professor may later be appointed a full professor. Assistant, associate, and full professors perform many duties. They teach classes, they advise students, and they carry out research. They also serve on committees and take part in other activities. Other faculty members are not expected to do all these jobs. They are not on a tenure track. Instead, they might be in adjunct or visiting positions. A visiting professor has a job at one school but works at another for a period of time. An adjunct professor is also a limited or part-time position to do research or teach classes. Adjunct professors have a doctorate. Another position is that of lecturer. Lecturers teach classes, but they may or may not have a doctorate. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can learn English and stay informed every day from your computer or mobile device at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes at VOA Learning English.
I'm Mario Ritter with the VOA Special English Education Report. Some American parents might think their children need better educations to compete with China and other countries. But how much do the parents themselves need to change? A new book called Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother by Amy Chua has caused a debate about cultural differences in parenting. Ms. Chua is a professor at the Yale Law School in New Haven, Connecticut, and the mother of 2 daughters. She was raised in the American Midwest by immigrant Chinese parents. In the Chinese culture, the tiger represents strength and power. In her book, Ms. Chua writes about how she demanded excellence from her daughters. For example, she threatened to burn her daughter's stuffed animals unless she played a piece of music perfectly. She would insult her daughters if they failed to meet her expectations. Ms. Chua says she had a clear list of what her daughters, Sophia and Louisa, were not permitted to do. They could not attend a sleepover, have a play date, watch TV, or play computer games, be in a school play, or get any grade less than an A. Many people have criticized Amy Chua. Some say her parenting methods were abusive. She even admits that her husband, who is not Chinese, sometimes objected to her parenting style. But she says that was the way her parents raised her and her 3 sisters. Ms. Chua makes fun of her own extreme style of parenting. She says she eased some of the pressure after her younger daughter rebelled and shouted, "I hate my life, I hate you." Ms. Chua says she decided to retreat when it seemed like there was a risk that she might lose her daughter. But she also says American parents often have low expectations of their children's abilities. She says one of the biggest differences I see between Western and Chinese parents is that Chinese parents assume strength rather than fragility. Stacy DeBroff has written 4 books on parenting. She says the debate over Ms. Chua's book has to do with 2 questions. What does it mean to be a successful parent? And what does it mean to be a successful child? Ms. DeBroff says Amy Chua's parenting style is not limited to Chinese families. She says it represents a traditional way of parenting among immigrants seeking a better future for their children. But she also sees a risk. When children have no time to be social or to follow their own interests, they might not develop other skills that they need to succeed in life. Stacy DeBroff advises parents to develop their own style of parenting and not just repeat the way they were raised. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. What are your thoughts about parenting styles and cultural differences? Tell us at voaspecialenglish.com or on Facebook at VOA Learning English. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Conflicts around the world are keeping tens of millions of young people from going to school. Many have physical or emotional injuries that make it hard or even impossible for them to learn. Later this year, UNESCO will release its 2012 Education for All Global Monitoring Report. UNESCO is the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization. The yearly publication is part of a global campaign to provide primary education to all children within the next 3 years. The report documents the situation in countries that have made the least progress toward the Millennium Development Goals. These goals require universal primary education and equality for boys and girls in schooling by 2015. Pauline Rose is the director of the report. She says at last count, in 35 conflict-affected countries, there were 28 million children out of school. In some countries, schools were not even accessible in conflict zones. There are no teachers, and the schools are sometimes attacked. The Geneva Conventions bar the targeting of public places like schools and hospitals. In some cases, schools are targeted because they represent the government. In other cases, schools are targeted for religious or political reasons. Pauline Rose points to Afghanistan, where militant groups have attacked girls' schools to keep girls from getting an education. In other parts of the world, schools are often caught in the crossfire of violence. Conflicts also put girls and boys at risk of sexual violence and of being forced into war. Under international law, refugees are the only displaced people with a guaranteed right to education. But that guarantee often means little. Last year, Pauline Rose visited camps in northern Kenya that shelter more than 250,000 refugees from Somalia. She says half the children have no access to school, and there are classes of over 300 children. The study asks, what if conflict states in sub-Saharan Africa moved just 10% of their military spending to education? UNESCO says they could educate more than 1/4 of their out-of-school population. And in Pakistan, it says 20% of the military budget could provide primary education for all children. Experts say one country has been a real success story. For years, Botswana has used its wealth from diamond exports to finance universal primary education and to create a skills base for its growing economy. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.